Hiya Declan, I just wanted to record some comments for you on this homepage. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thanks for sending it anyway. I think, generally speaking, it does look good, but there's a few things that I think definitely need to be sorted out, obviously, before we can put this thing live. And there's just a couple of things in the code as well that I've just find a little bit on the sloppy side, if I'm being totally honest. And there's a few things that just need sort of fixing anyway, so I'll just start walking through it. It will be a little bit might be a little bit disorganised in how I sort of present this. One thing I would watch is, I know your designers introduced like a bold font for like things like where it says reasons you'll love JB, but just one thing is just maybe just watch the size, try and make sure that the size, because like this type here, I know there's a bit more type now, but that's been made smaller than this, and I think that this type could maybe just increase slightly as well, but maybe just only a little bit. And then I think the gap between the Sleep Smart and the recognised as one could maybe just be a little bit less as well. I know I'm probably going to sound really finicky with stuff like this, but I want things to be right. Do you know what I mean? One of my sort of rules with this is I think you, as a team, should be doing things at least as good as I was doing it. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to accept any less than that, because I think if I could do it just as a one-man band, then, you know, a team the size of you guys should easily be able to do it just as well as I were doing it. So just a couple of things. Like I say, some of this is a little bit finicky. But this 1,000 companies to inspire, typically things like that would always be an SVG using my icon system. Now, in this instance, I can understand why your developer might not have done that, because of this London Stock Exchange and the little icon there, that coat of arms, it's too fine to be an SVG. So I can understand in that instance why that's been made a PNG. But just keep an eye on that. Generally speaking, those should be SVGs. One thing I have noticed as well on a lot of this is the alt tags are completely wrong. And I mean, you know yourself how important an alt tag is. So, you know, you can't, it's just sloppy that. You can't just leave it as JB Sleep Smart. You know, it should be 1,000 years. And that's throughout the site. All the alt tags are wrong, really. So that definitely needs sorting out. One of the things that just remind me as well, whenever we type the word JB, if it's a header, then it should always have the little registration mark. And if it's in body copy, any symbols like that in body copy don't want to be there anymore. So just a little side note that. So that's my sort of first note. Now, when it comes down to mobile, this definitely needs some work. For one, this margin, it looks too great now, or too big rather, from the left-hand edge to this. It just doesn't look right. And I think the text becomes too difficult to read. Now, what I think we might have to do is maybe do two versions of this background, where once it becomes to mobile size, we simplify it, and maybe just have the sort of this graffiti stuff underneath the products, and maybe sort of simplify it up top. I've done that before, but or whatever way of doing it. We definitely need something, because it's just not readable. I mean, that 1,000 years, sorry, not 1,000 years, the 1,000 companies thing icon just looks totally lost, obviously there. So that just needs some work. It just looks like I say, it just looks like, I know you probably rushed to send me it today, but in future I'd rather you just be honest and say, look, we're struggling to send you it today. I'd rather spend another day on it and get it right, because sending me stuff when it's like this, do you know what I mean? I'm never gonna sign it off in a million years. Do you know what I mean? So just, I mean, you know, you can see what's wrong with that yourself. And I think the gap between the bottom of the image and the black banner there is too big as well. So I think that just needs some more refinement. Does that? So that's that. One other thing, I mean, this is really finicky now, but like I said, I do want the code base to be kept neat if possible. Now, I mean, your developer will know what I mean. You've generally kept my class names and the BEM structure, which is exactly what I wanted you to do. So I'm happy with that. But where this has been just made a strong tag, that shouldn't really be a strong tag. It should actually be a modifier of that. So it should be home-hero __ copy, and then it should be _, and then strong or whatever, or, you know, bold or whatever. And then you can actually then say font weight, and then specify a font weight. Because if you just make something strong, well, one, it doesn't fit with the Ben method. You know, it's not fitting in with the Ben philosophy, and, you know, a method of naming classes. But that's one thing that's wrong with it. But two, if you just use the strong tag, you're leaving it up to the browser then to just give it its own weight. And I think it's better just to specify that in the CSS, because we are using Offler, Feller and Jones's typography website, I think it is here, look. And we have, I mean, I can tell you which weights we've actually got. But if you look in the CSS as well, you know, there's certain weights that we've already got set up, so you don't need to use strong. You know, actually specify what weight it needs to be. One thing as well while I'm on it is that none of the font icons or the SVG system hasn't loaded in any of the icons. So obviously that'll need to be sorted before we can take it live, because all the icons are missing. So, you know, it makes it hard to approve. Now I think as you come down, this starts to look. I mean, don't be wrong, I am happy with it. I think it looks nice. I think the gap between the bottom of the text and this button could just be a little bit bigger as well, only a slight bit bigger. And then I think the buttons need a hover state. If you look in my CSS, and I think there's a mixin that creates a nice like hover when you hover over a button, so you might just want to look at that. And then underneath these images, you can see here, there's like a white line. I'm not sure what that is, I haven't looked. I don't know if it's padding or a border, but that wants removing. And again, all the alt tags need changing. And then as this comes down in mobile view, it looks alright to a point, and then it starts to go a bit crazy. Again, it's just about refinement. You know, we can't have that like just hugging over the bed. So, you know, it just needs that little bit of refinement really to sort it out. And I think maybe once it gets to this size, we could maybe move these images in just a little bit so that, you know, just so it looks a bit, so you don't get loads of this white space. But I mean, that might not be essential, but definitely not having it overlapping the text. I know there's only so much you can do with responsive, and I'm not going to get too carried away with stuff like that. So again, when JB appears there, it would have the little R, but not in the body copy. I think again, these buttons just want a bit of space between them. They just look too close together. And again, put the hover state. And one thing as well, all throughout this, all the links and nearly all the buttons, none of them link to the right places. So obviously that needs fixing. And just make sure that the terminology on the button's correct. Like read more and where to buy is correct there, but like in a few of the others, like seeing actions wrong obviously for the blog, and it doesn't even link to the blog. So just sort of bear that in, you know, and again the little R in the body copy that I'd want removing. I know these are only small things, but I mean like the links are obviously not, and the terminology is not. They're massive things, so they need fixing. There's a play button on there as well that needs taking off. This will need to play the that bed is called the Revolution Pocket. And obviously that will need to play that video in a lightbox. And if you go to our video page on our website there, JB Videos, you'll see what lightbox I've already got a lightbox already loaded, so you can just hook straight into that. You can copy the code straight from that video page for the Revolution Pocket. So that'll be dead easy to set that up. One thing your developer might need to do is just make sure that the code for the lightbox is being loaded in on that page, but I think it will be. I think these, where it says video name, just remove those. I don't think we need to do that. We can just say view all videos. We don't need to list them like that. I think, I'm just looking at my little notes here, mate, to see. So we've mentioned about using SVGs where it's possible. We've talked about BEM modifiers and class names. We've talked about alt tags. We've talked about making sure that the SVG and the icon system looks right. We've talked about things looking correct when it's responsive. We talked about the gap under the images there. I'll send you the correct text as well, by the way. Or I might just edit it myself to add the text right at the end. We've talked about removing those video links. We've talked about videos need to play in a lightbox. We've talked about increase the gap between the text and the button. I think that's referring to this. We've talked about not having the registration in the symbols in the body copy. Guarantee images. Yeah, the guarantee has a play button there that obviously wants taking off. Some links are wrong, we've talked about that. Buttons having the wrong text, scene action, that's that. Hero, we've talked about that not looking correct on mobile. We've talked about a larger gap in between the buttons on these. And then just one other final thing, and this is quite important. I'm not really a fan of making things just having a div with, and then just an empty div with, and then just using a background image. I know why you've done it, so you can use that background position cover, but you can actually do that with CSS without, and it still be an image. I think one thing I don't like, I mean, I always like images that are actually important to be real images where possible, and not just background images, because if for any reason someone's not got the CSS on or anything, then that won't show, and I think it's just bad practice. I think it'd be better as a real image with that if possible. And then you can apply an alt tag to it, whereas just in the markup there you've just got an empty div, which is just a bit poor. And I think the CSS is that I think it's using the object fit property. You can still get that cover sort of fit exactly the same as what you've done there, really, but without it being a background image, I think. I know the browser support might not be quite as good, but we're targeting modern browsers and mobile devices anyway, not old browsers. So, yeah, I just prefer to see that as a real image if possible. I don't mind things being background images when they are background images, but not when they should be real images, if that makes sense to you. I think a background image, to my mind, is just something that's like this, like that graffiti. You know, when it's not a, you know, when it's just when it is a background and it's not, not like a part of what should be in the markup, in my opinion. So I think that's about it, mate. Just one other thing to sort of watch as well is, I appreciate you using the sort of old class names, but just make sure they still make sense. I think there was one down here that said something like faux link. Just make sure they still make sense to you. I just don't like sloppy stuff like that in the code. I think there was one what says faux link, and it was a faux link when I were doing it because it made sense when I were doing it the way that I was setting it up. But I don't think it does anymore. So just make sure that class names do make sense, because I know it's alright just doing it on a homepage like this, but when you start doing it throughout a site, it just becomes, and you just keep adding to it, it just becomes sloppier and sloppier and sloppier, and then it just gets to the point where none of the markup or CSS makes any sense. So I think they're my points. I think if you can make all that, make all the links link correctly and everything, and then I can pass it on to Roger just to get his final sign off. But I can't, and I'll probably add the correct text as well before I do that. But obviously things like that just need to be right before I show him it. I can't have, like the icons missing and stuff like that. It's a bit like when we talked about the designs the other day. There's no point in sending stuff like this unless you were happy with it. Do you know what I mean? So, like I say, in future, I would rather you just be honest and just say, look, Richard, we need another day to get it right, rather than just sort of banging it out and the things being wrong with it that yourselves are wrong with it. And I'd rather you be honest anyway. I mean, I freelanced for 11 years. I've heard I've made myself every excuse in book about, link, you know what I mean? So I'd rather you just be honest and just say, look, we need an extra day than coming up with, excuses that, because I've told them all myself anyway, mate. Not saying that you're making excuses, but there were just a couple of things in your email that I think I'd sort of said before to clients, do you know what I mean? So I'd rather you just be honest, you know what I mean? Not saying that you were lying, but you know what I mean. Okay, right, cheers guys. I think if you make all those changes, then I think we'll be almost ready to sign off. I know there seems like a lot there, but I don't think there is really when you break it down. Okay, cheers, thanks, bye.